All right, the storm season marks the 25th anniversary of Hurricane Andrew. The Category 5 storm roared ashore in August of 1992 and became one of the worst natural disasters in Florida history. Entire communities in South Florida were flattened, but through the devastation came remarkable stories of survival. Bay News 9's Laurie Davison traveled to South Dade County to talk with a family who put their lives back together, one brick at a time.
Yeah, baby!
South Florida has a vibe all its own.
Laid back.
Amazing. Fantastic.
The weather is warm.
Fun in the sun.
The water is clear.
The ocean's as blue as you can imagine.
And the beaches are full.
Yeah, baby! Super happy. No worries in the world.
But 25 years ago, an unwelcome guest named Hurricane Andrew crashed the party.
Yeah, it was hard. It was very hard.
Bill Zinn and his wife Sandy look back on August 24th, 1992 with a mixture of pride and pain.
I don't think I ever cried as much as I did following this storm.
The couple was at home with their children when Hurricane Andrew hit. As the family huddled under a mattress, their son Ian rolled on a tape recorder in his pocket.
Holy shit! The roof just came off.
All right.
Okay.
It's all right. We're underneath the mattress. We're fine.
When we crawled out of the mattress, it's kind of a blur, really. We just kind of wandered around, I guess, more or less in a fog.
Realizing their home was gone.
It's hard to go through to see everything you own basically destroyed.
There are still remnants of Hurricane Andrew here in the Zinn's neighborhood, like this concrete slab that sits where a house once stood right next door.
You just deal with it. You just move on.
For the Zinns, moving on didn't mean moving away. Instead, they rebuilt on the exact same spot.
It's nice to see, what we got now versus where we were.
These are all pictures from Andrew.
The new house even includes a wall of remembrance dedicated to the storm.
We stuck together and we made it.
Just as the Zinns survived, so did South Florida, giving them reason to celebrate a community even stronger than before. In Miami-Dade County, Laurie Davison, Bay News 9.
The Zinns hope Hurricane Andrew was a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but they still make a hurricane kit, prepare every storm season, and urge everyone else to do the same. A Leilman firefighter and paramedic who was accused of child abuse is speaking out. Jeremy Graham and his wife say the accusations tore their family apart. Now reunited, they say they want to raise awareness about medical conditions they say can be mistaken for child abuse. Bay News 9's Laurie Davison sat down with the couple to talk about their experience.
Tristan is he's just like a little part of me. Like, I can't believe I made him.
We tried a good 3-4 years, 2 rounds of IVF. Finally, the second one hit.
Jeremy and Viviana Graham call the birth of their 1-year-old son Tristan a miracle. From the minute he was born, they've documented every moment with pictures, each month celebrated in a montage on his nursery wall.
I mean, he's my world.
That all changed when Tristan was 4 months old. The couple was at home with him when he had a seizure.
The only thing I was thinking of is my child okay? That's the only thing.
Tristan was rushed to the hospital where doctors diagnosed a brain bleed.
We just thought they were trying to figure out what was wrong with him. And we later found out every test that they ran on him was to prove that it was child abuse.
Days later, Jeremy, a former paramedic of the year, was arrested for aggravated child abuse.
When I got accused, I was scared to go out of my house. I was scared to go to my local Publix. I was scared to go to my local gym. I was ashamed.
All right.
While the case was under investigation, Jeremy was only allowed short visits, so the couple had to live apart for nearly 8 months.
I lost months, precious months, milestones, first words, first babbling, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's.
Eventually, the Grahams hired their own medical experts who determined that Tristan has a chronic medical condition that likely caused the bleeding. Those two doctors said they found no evidence that he was a victim of child abuse.
Basically, they all called it smoking guns. Basically, I was accused for no reason.
Pinellas County Sheriff Bob Gualtieri couldn't talk about the Grahams case specifically, but he says child protection investigators are obligated to look into families when allegations are made.
There is a whole bunch of eyes on every single case. There's multiple levels, multiple reviews, and I know that we're doing it very well. The investigators are doing a great job here in Pinellas County to make sure that the kids stay safe.
The state attorney's office decided not to move forward with the case, and the charges against Jeremy were dropped. In June, he was allowed to live with his wife and son again full-time.
I was really scared of losing my bond with him, but immediately I could tell that we didn't, and it was just great to hold him in my arms. It really was.
Still, he says the experience left scars.
It'll always be with me. I'll always be the person that got accused of child abuse, I think, and that's just the way it is. I'll just have to deal with it.
But the couple says Tristan is happy and healthy, and they're together. So all is right in their world again. In Pinellas County, Laurie Davison, Bay News 9.
Now, the Grahams have filed paperwork to contest the investigators' findings of child abuse, but they say so far no decision has been made on their case.
Now, the latest breaking news.
Breaking news tonight at 10 out of Tampa. Tempers flare at a protest over the shooting of an unarmed man this week. First, some background for you. Hillsborough County deputies shot and killed the suspect while serving a search warrant. Again, that was earlier this week. Bay News 9's Laurie Davison is joining us live in Tampa tonight in Clare Mill, the site of these protests. And Laurie, it is now day 3 of the protests. Emotions are running very high. There are lots of people behind you, and things apparently are getting out of hand. What can you tell us?
Yeah, Veronica, it's really a very chaotic situation out here. We are a little distance away, but really not too far, so I can give you a pretty good look at this. Take a look at the scene behind me. We are literally standing behind a wall of police officers. There are at least 24 police officers out here, law enforcement officers, monitoring this situation. What is happening right now is that these protesters are in the middle of the road. They're in a very busy road. This is 78th Street out here in Hillsborough County. It is a very highly traveled road. They are now in the middle of the road, completely blocking it. And Tim is going to move down and show you. You can see there is also a line of police cars out here because they have basically had to shut this road down for a good 2 blocks because of this huge protest. There are several hundred people out here. They do have their signs. They are chanting and yelling. They also have been throwing some bottles. We've heard some bottles being thrown here already tonight. The sheriff has started meeting with community leaders to try to calm all of this down and assure them that this will be a transparent investigation, but some people want more. They gather in the streets, marching, shouting, and holding up signs calling for justice for Lavonia Riggins.
Only thing we asking the sheriff department to do, to come forward and talk to us, to let us know why.
But rage in this community is rising to a riot level. It erupted Thursday night with rocks being thrown, street signs knocked down, and trash being set on fire. It's a community literally burning with anger.
So we need some peace. Oh, this is gonna get real out here, for real. We need some peace. We need some justice. It's gonna get real.
Riggins was killed when the SWAT team was serving a drug-related search warrant at his house. A deputy fired 1 shot. Afterwards, investigators found out Riggins was unarmed. Neighbors are outraged.
you perceived him as an immediate threat. If you perceive me as an immediate threat right now, is it my clothes? Is it the color of my skin, my hat, my hair? I don't understand that. And until we get some kind of answers, I don't know what to tell you.
The sheriff's office is promising a transparent investigation.
The decision is going to be a difficult one to be made on the deputy's perception of his threat and what was made in a split second.
But Riggins' friends feel like he was targeted, and there is a strong lack of trust.
Because everybody wants answers. If you hide stuff in the dirt, it's going to come to light eventually, always, with anybody. It's going to come up.
Black pastors and community leaders are urging people to be patient. They say violence isn't the answer.
It does not serve anyone good when you go out and you destroy the property, especially in your own neighborhood.
Protesters don't plan to stop. Some say they will try to keep it peaceful, but they're also determined to speak their piece. And tonight we have seen those protesters getting right up in these deputies' faces, yelling, screaming at them, cussing at them. But the deputies have not taken any action tonight. They told me that as long as things stay non-violent, they're okay with all this. But that does change, of course, if things become violent like last night. Last night they did arrest 5 people out here for inciting a riot. Reporting live in Hillsborough County, Laurie Davison, Bay News 9.
All right, Laurie, thank you for the update. The deputy involved has been placed on paid administrative leave, which is standard practice. The sheriff's office says deputies had seen weapons in the house before. They say Riggins made sudden movements and the deputy shot. The sheriff's office says it is working with the state attorney's office to investigate, and they're vowing to keep the investigation open, they say, and transparent to the public. Welcome back. I'm Veronica Cintron. Our Black History Month celebration continues tonight. Long before the Greek divers were working the sponge docks in Tarpon Springs, African Americans were already laying the groundwork. Bay News 9's Laurie Davison has more in tonight's special assignment.
Ladies and gentlemen, tickets here, guys, for our next sponge boat ride.
Taking a tour of Tarpon Springs
Folks, you trusted the boat ride today?
is like visiting Greece.
Anybody want to go sponge boat ride? Have a boat going out.
Without ever leaving Florida. A mix of the showy and the cultural.
Whoopa!
A place where you can climb on a boat.
Welcome aboard.
And soak up history in a city known as the sponge capital of the world. It's an industry dominated by the Greeks here. But dive in deeper and you'll find African Americans were among the first spongers in the region. They were called hookers for the techniques they used.
What they did in the early days before the Greeks came, sponges were harvested entirely by hooking them with a long hook from dinghies.
The city's curator of arts and historical resources, Tina Bukovala, says in the early 1900s, Greek immigrants arrived in waves. Using diving methods, they were able to harvest 5 times as many sponges, eventually taking over the docks.
Many in the African American community went to work on their boats, often as crew members, engineers, cooks, but some as divers as well.
These are people that I knew personally.
Alfred Quarterman remembers it all. Walking through Rose Cemetery, he points out dozens of graves that belonged to blacks who worked in the sponge trade, including his father and uncle.
And believe it or not, they both spoke Greek fluently. Because after all, if you're on a boat for 2 months or so back there, you better understand something that's going on.
Alfred recalls a closeness between the two communities.
I have never had a problem with Greeks because when my father went out on the boat, it was not unusual for the families to invite me over to their house. That's when I learned about goat cheese, feta they call it, and spaghetti, and Greek candy.
Most of the African American spongers are gone now. Their contributions marked in gravestones at the cemetery. But Alfred is keeping track.
Thomas Stout, Florida, Reuben Smith, Bahamas. Thomas Knowles, Florida. John Johnson, Johnny Johnson, Frank Fisher.
He worries about their impact being forgotten.
And you'd hate to see anybody that lose their identity because nobody thought about them anymore.
So he's working to have the cemetery designated as a National Historical Site.
And when I see the history of my father and my uncle, I'm very proud of that, and I love it.
The pioneering spirit of those early spongers still living on in people's hearts and minds on the docks to this day. In Tarpon Springs, Laurie Davison, Bay News 9.
And historians say the hooking techniques used by the black sponge divers came from the Bahamas and West Indies. Many of them started working in the industry in Key West and then migrated to Tarpon Springs in the late 1800s.
This hurricane season marks the 25th anniversary of one of the strongest hurricanes to ever hit Florida, Hurricane Andrew. It was a storm that took lives and flattened communities. Since then, scientists and engineers have been testing ways to help buildings withstand nature's full force. Bay News 9's Laurie Davison takes us to a facility in Miami that is literally blowing the roof off of hurricane research.
Wow is the best way to describe it.
It's amazing the power, the magnitude, the force.
Inside a hangar at Florida International University, 12 giant fans create the wall of wind. A hurricane simulator designed to put building codes and supplies to the test. 25 years ago, the wall of wind didn't exist. Now, researchers are able to simulate hurricane-like conditions within these 4 walls and use models like this to show how those conditions could affect things like walls and windows in actual buildings.
And you get a little taste of what a Category 5 hurricane is and can be. And it does give you that respect that, boy, those things are powerful and they can do a lot of damage.
It's a lot more than just a wind tunnel.
The fans bring the air in from that end, and then they contract that flow of air so it speeds up. That's what got us the speed.
Triangles on the ground mimic buildings in the hurricane's path.
So we got the speed, we got the personality, and when it hits that structure, it's as close to Mother Nature as we can get.
The goal is to see if building codes implemented since Hurricane Andrew can withstand nature's force. In this test, the advances of the tougher post-Andrew code seemed pretty clear.
The newer buildings did pretty well.
Since Andrew, the government's learned a lot about how to prepare and respond to hurricanes too.
Well, research gets transferred into operations. So without research, we wouldn't change the way we do things. And with the research, our track forecasts for hurricanes are so much better.
Using new tools, this graphic shows how they might have been able to better predict Hurricane Andrew's path today.
Now the research now is all focused on intensity.
To foresee the kind of rapid strengthening Andrew went through. Back at the wall of wind,
we here, we're trying to make an impact so that folks can be in a safer place. Heaven forbid a big storm comes our way again.
They're hoping to save property and lives. In Miami, Laurie Davison, Bay News 9.
Results from the testing done at the Wall of Wind have already led to changes in Florida's building codes and updated computer models used to predict insurance losses. Duke